Welcome back. You're still tuned in to News and Views with myself, Salilo Makwidi. The time is 25 minutes past 9, and we're going to be, I think, having one of my favorite segments is our hashtag Africa Focus segment, where we look at some of the top stories here on the continent, whether political, religious, or, dynamics that just shape the continent that we are in. And today, we're going to be looking at a very, very interesting one as Africa continues to grapple with growing insecurity from insurgencies in the Sahel to instability in the Horn and Great Lakes. Questions around who shapes the continent's security architecture are more urgent than ever. In recent remarks before the U.S. Senate Armed Services Committee, General Michael Langley, the commander of Africom, singled out Morocco as a key partner when it comes to promoting security and economic development across the continent of Africa. Langley praised Morocco's military training programs, its role in the United Nations peacekeeping missions, and its growing influence through joint military exercises like African Lion, a co-hosted initiative with the US. This year's iteration saw over 8,000 soldiers from 27 countries, including NATO forces, converging under the banner of multinational readiness. But this growing military footprint yes, raising a lot of questions. What is Morocco's real agenda, and what role does the U.S. Africa Command, or Africom for short, play when it comes to shaping the militarization of the continent under the guise of stability? Is this really about peace and partnership, or what one might call soft military occupation? To help us unpack this, we're joined by Mariam Jooma, Carikci, a journalist and researcher at the Media Review Network, an organization that we know and love here at Salam Media. They're known for their incisive critique of Western geopolitical interests here in Africa. And Mariam is joining us via our virtual platform. Mariam, thank you so much for joining us. Always a pleasure to have you on Salam Media. And yeah, looking forward to another eye-opening, insightful conversation.
Thank you, Salilo. It's always a pleasure to be with you.
Pleasure's all ours. I think, for our listeners and viewers who might not be in tune and in touch, what exactly is Africom? What is it? What's its role? What is this thing?
You know, Salilo, this is such an important question. The idea that we're not even aware of what Africom is, despite it being in existence for now almost more than 20 years. Essentially, what the US has done it is to divide the world into different theaters of military responsibility. And so they have, CENTCOM, which is Central and European in terms of geographically, that's Central Europe and bits of the Middle East. Then they have the Asia section, the Asia Pacific section. Then they have Latin America. And so Africom fits under one of those divisions of the world. And essentially what it is the US's kind of link to all of what's happening in Africa militarily. And it tries to join partnerships or to bring countries into partnerships with the US for joint military operations, for the sharing of technology, and most certainly for as a business platform to showcase the latest in terms of the US military technology that's available, as well as those of its NATO allies.
I want to touch on Morocco now. General Langley said Morocco is a security exporter and a regional leader. Let's talk about their role in Africom, and what do you think of this framing by the U.S. military when it comes to Morocco and their role?
So, Salilo, we understand if we look at South Africa's position at the moment with regard to the US, we kind of in their crosshairs. We are taking Israel to the ICJ. We've taken it to the ICJ, and we have very strong. We have a strong position on the Polisario front, for example, in Morocco. In contrast, Morocco is very much aligned to a military and, essentially an authoritarian regime. where the US feels that it can actually impose, and it has done so, its foreign policy without any implications in terms of punitive measures against it. In fact, Morocco enjoys quite a high status as a North African key ally to the US. And what the African Lions exercise it runs for a couple of weeks at a time. So at the moment, it's running until the 23rd of May. And it, as you said at the outset, it involves many nations, including the NATO allies. And what they do is joint military drills and exercises, including, simulation of anti-terrorist situations or scenarios, with, the ultimate objective, in formal terms, of countering extremism. But now that raises all kinds of questions for us. And with regard to Morocco, it is very much to do with maintaining the regime and the authoritarian nature of the Moroccan regime.
Mm, mm, mm. What would you say are some of the risks of outsourcing the continent's security to external powers like the United States, in particular, who we all know have long records of destabilizing regions for their own interests?
So, Lena, this is deeply problematic. I mean, the idea, for example, that we don't even know exactly how many US bases there are on the continent is, for one, very alarming. It's only through the work of amazing journalists like Nick Turse, for example, of The Intercept, who's taken years and years to track using AI and whatever other unofficial and official documentation he may have been able to access, to come up with the idea that we actually have about 29 bases, American bases, on the continent. So the headquarters of Africom are actually in Stuttgart, Germany. Now you have to ask this question: why is an African command center that's meant to facilitate relations between the US and Africa based in Europe? Well, that's because no African nation wanted to host Africom, which again speaks to the fact that African nations are fully aware of the risks. However, the benefits to the elites and the entrenched political class make it such that they would still continue doing these exercises, despite the fact that they know it increases the instability in the region. If we look at the situation, for example, in Sudan, can you believe that Chad, which is a major contributor in terms of a transit route for arms and ammunition to the RSF, Chad is actually a country where Africom is fully active. So the US actually has intelligence and surveillance capacity in Chad, which means that they have full knowledge of how the UAE are transferring arms to the RSF, and yet nothing's been done. So essentially, there's this selective, how do we say, highlighting of particular groups that are perhaps palatable and unpalatable to the foreign US policy. And what we're trying to highlight in terms of what the MRN is doing is to get African civil society to say, of what benefit are these foreign military military exercises to the continent, and who has oversight? I mean, do we actually know what they're doing, why they're doing what they're doing, and to what extent is it actually exacerbating conflict rather than bringing us closer towards a peace?
And when one thinks of Morocco, there's that little issue of Western Sahara and the Sahrawi people, an issue that many Western countries continue to ignore. How does Morocco's close relationship with the US now affect, the support for the Sahrawi people's struggle? Because at this point, everyone wants to be in the US good books because Donald Trump is here.
100%. I think exactly that. That South Africa is likely, using our foreign policy as an example in terms of the support that we do give or we have given diplomatically to the Sahrawi front. We're likely to see a lot of flack coming, from the US towards South Africa even more. But I think, what's important here is to understand where countries like Israel, for example, are actually in the mix here. Because Israel has a very strong relationship with Morocco. And this year, the African Lions exercise extends across Ghana, Senegal, Tunisia, and Morocco. And each of those countries have strong relations with Israel. And so we have to then understand to what extent are the definitions of liberty and freedom being defined by an oppressing and an occupying state like Israel within the African context. And so are we as Africans having to give up our own struggles for sovereignty and justice in order to benefit from Israeli tech and from cyber intelligence? These are the very, I think, urgent and pertinent questions we have to ask, because there is no room at the moment for the AU or IGAD or any of the regional blocks or formations to oversee Africom. And essentially, it's a foreign military that's doing exactly as it pleases in Africa. And so when it comes to secessionist movements or independence movements, depending on how you want to look at it, we have to ask how and why are we allowing external actors into a situation that could only be inflamed by their presence.
Yeah, definitely. I think we're going to leave it there, Mariam. Another insightful conversation. Always a pleasure chatting to you, and looking forward to chat to you again in the not so distant future.
Thank you so much, Salalo.
There you go, Mariam Jooma Carikci, on our hashtag Africa Focus feature. Yeah, interesting stuff, eh? For me, what this signals, with all of a sudden now the United States of America saying, wow, Morocco is now this remarkable country that is championing peace on the continent, and they are the exporters of security and economic development on the continent. To me, it's almost a message to South Africa, eh? To us to say, well, we found someone else. We're moving on with our lives, because normally these kinds of drills and these kinds of U.S. Africa relations would happen here on the continent. South Africa would be, the first ones, to enter the conversations. Would be the first ones who are singled out by the US to be a close ally, to kind of be a representative and big brother of the continent. And yeah, Morocco seems to be America's new best friend, and this is not surprising, because, well, we all know that little issue of Western Sahara. Africa's last remaining colony, Morocco. Taking people's lands, subjugating and oppressing them, and trying to push them out. Almost sounds like Israel and what they're doing there, and how they've gotten a big brother and best friend and sugar daddy in the United States of America. So yeah, another similar scenario happening here on the African continent. Morocco finding a big brother, a sugar daddy, a best friend in the United States of America, while they are dispossessing people of their land, while they are continuously subjugating the Western Sahara people, and they are being seen as champions and close friends and allies of peace, according to the United States of America. And yeah, I think that's like the last goodbye and good night to South Africa when it comes to our bilateral relations with the United States of America. We just don't fit the description of what a good friend of the United States is supposed to be. We are not genociding people. We are not oppressing people. We are not taking over people's lands that have historically, for thousands and thousands of years, belonged to them. We're not colonizing anyone. And well, here on the continent, Morocco is doing that. And all of a sudden, they are, the best friends of the United States of America. So yeah, those dynamics are shifting. They're changing. And it's clear to everyone that, countries like South Africa, who are promoting peace, who call for justice for the oppressed people of the world, are not going to gain favor, from this Donald Trump's administration. But if there's one positive to pull out of this, and this is one thing that none of us should forget, is this is just an administration. After 4 years, Donald Trump will be out. And hopefully, there'll be an American president with a bit of common sense. Going to take a quick break. News and views continues after this.